Bill selected reading, I had no idea what it was. But I knew it was going to be from Louise Hay. And I wanted to make a point about that, is what Louise was talking about is true to the extent that it's true in this conditional experience. So you can say that truth, is there an absolute truth? Yes and no. In the conditional experience, that's how we experience life. Because we live in this sensational world of the possibilities of how we use this. But I'm going to tell you there's something back of that that is true. There is an absolute level of reality that is beyond our understanding, that has to deal with this dualistic experience that we have in life. We call that spirit or God. We say it often. There is one power, one presence, one infinite intelligence permeating and saturating all of creation. That is not subject to debate about my belief. It is this unformed substance from which everything emerges. It is the infinite supply of creativity and love that is back of this experience. On this level, on the human level, we can choose to not believe that and believe what Louise was talking about is I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm not. But in an absolute sense, in this spiritual journey that we're making, the idea that we do in New Thought is to bring ourselves to a higher understanding of that absolute that is beyond this system of duality that we are raised in, that we often contemplate and live in.
That's fabulous.
I'm done. Thank you. You just saved me 15 more minutes. This is really good. Oh, so what is it? Okay, so today's topic is back to source. And when I wrote this, I was thinking of something else. I was thinking of a reference nobody will ever get, which was back to school. Back to source, except for those with kids who are going back to school because we're all going, yay! Right? But what I started thinking about is this back to source is when we experience something we do not like in our lives, we have been thinking something negative. That's what Louise was talking about. We have been contemplating something at such a belief level that it is manifest in our life as some negative outcome of a thought that we've had. So the idea is that there isn't any lack of substance. There's no lack of love. There's no lack of creative ideas present for us to use. The problem must then lie in the fact that we don't have an adequate idea of what it is we want. Right? Because if all of this is permeating and saturating everything, if absolute love is present right here and right now, if infinite abundance and substance is available always because it is what everything is, then the only thing that can block that is our choice not to accept that. And how do we get to a place of thinking about how to not accept this negative outcome of a powerful idea? We turn back to that idea of source. We bring our minds in alignment with that absolute truth to the degree that we are able to do it. The greater the degree, the more swiftly the experience manifests in our life. The more potential we have. When we have a larger idea of the good that is present, we are becoming ready to receive that larger portion of the good that's already present. Because we can't receive anything more than we're willing to accept. That's just a basic thing. If you don't accept it, it ain't coming your way. On the good side of life. So, Bill and I and Reverend Captain John Hennis were out sailing yesterday, and I'd like to say it was one of those wonderful adventures, breasting the waves and crashing down, and the wind was blowing, but we were sailing on the upper Hudson, and it was only about 5 to 10 mile an hour winds. But it was an absolutely wonderful experience. How many people here have ever sailed? Oh, good. So I won't have to explain many of the metaphors. Sailing is an absolute perfect metaphor for metaphysics. It absolutely is. So here we are. We're puttering along. We're in a 22-foot boat, which actually is big enough, for anybody who knows, it's big enough to have a small cabin in that you probably couldn't get a good nap in. You know, but it's a fun boat to putter around on the Hudson. And what came to me during this whole thing, and I do this talk about once a year after we go sailing. So what came to me is, in our thinking, often we don't know where it is that we want to go. And then we get upset by the fact that we're not getting what we want. Okay, does anybody see the problem with this idea?
Yeah.
Right? So when you're sailing, you putter out of the marina, right? And you either encounter huge breakers if you're out in the ocean, or nice little waves when you're on the Hudson, which is a really good thing. But the first thing you have to do is you have to prepare the boat to get underway. So that involves some work. It involves some activity that you have to do. You have to unfurl the sails, you have to raise the sails, you have to, like tie lines off, run around the boat, act like you actually know what you're doing as a crew member, And once you get all that set, guess what you got to do? Set a course. You have to pick a place that you want to go to. So then you take the rudder and you pick some place in the distance and say, I'm going to go over there. Now, in the life metaphor of that, it could be something big, like I'm going to college, I'm going to have children, I'm going to be a success, however you define that. Or it could be something trivial, like I'm going to the grocery store to get this week's groceries, or whatever the course that you're setting, without the intention of where you want to go, you're going to make really great time and not get there because you don't know where you're going. So this idea of setting a course is the first step that we do. It's the 0 step in practical prayer. What is the purpose of this prayer? Now, the purpose could be, I want to experience something nice, which is a great purpose, right? But don't be picky about the niceness that comes your way, right? Or it could be a very specific purpose that we're looking for, which is about charting a course to where you want to go. And it may be something big that's going to require a lot of maps, and a lot of time and a lot of endeavor planning and looking for this thing to come about in your life. Whichever course you're going to set, that's up to you. The boat doesn't care which way you point it. It's just the vehicle by which you're getting there. It's the same with the practical prayer. Practical prayer doesn't have any restriction on what you're going to choose to use it for. It will work. It is not a respecter of persons. It works for everybody alike. And so when we do set a course, right, you get underway, and the wind starts blowing a little bit, and it catches your sails, and you start rolling along this little fringe of water that comes off the bow of the boat. That's the front of the boat for those of us who aren't nautical. And I'm only faking it, honestly. I was on a boat yesterday, so I got a couple of the terms down, So there's this sensation of motion, right? And you're cruising along, and you might be going fast, you might be going slow, until you realize that I've been doing this for 15 minutes and it looks like I'm in the same place. Has anybody ever started a prayer or set an intention to go somewhere, and you've been moving along and it just feels like you're not going anywhere? Right? Like, this isn't working. But actually it is. You see, it's only our perception that things aren't moving. As soon as we think something with the power of intention, backed by the strength of our belief and our emotions, the world, the entire universe, is moving towards bringing that into our experience, to bringing that into this condition, changing the entire universe to get us to that place. And sometimes it may seem like we're not moving fast enough. I caution patience, because when one starts praying for moving faster, the wind starts blowing harder. That'll get you there faster. It's going to be a much more exciting trip. Sometimes you get going so fast that your boat starts going like this. And all of a sudden you're looking like, wait, I want to slow down a little bit because it looks like I'm going to start taking on water. But you're getting to your end destination faster. So it's one of those things about clarifying our intention. This happens when you're sailing a lot too. So, you actually have to adjust to the wind when you're sailing. Right? So there could be a really strong wind, but if you're pointed at it, you're not going to catch any of it. You're not going to go anywhere except backwards, where the wind is pushing you. But if you adjust your sails a little bit and you adjust the direction of where you're going, Bill pointed this out yesterday, I'm going to use it anyhow. Sailing is the art of getting somewhere by never going directly there. And what you can do is you go that way to get over there, and ding, 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 and eventually you get there, But you're working with the wind. Now this is really the metaphor of using principle. The principle is always there. The principle is always active. The principle is responding to us all the time. It's the constant in this journey of manifesting our desires. And when we adjust ourselves to that wind, we catch more of it and we can move at the speed we desire. The funny thing about adjusting the sails on a sailboat, if not done properly, you end up wet. How wet depends on how improperly you set the sails. In fact, you may end up swimming if it's not set just right. So there's two ways to turn a sailboat into the wind. One's called a tack. That's when you're actually not going directly against the wind. And the other is called a jibe. When you jibe, there is always the possibility of turning the boat over. That's called capsizing. I told you I got a couple of these phrases. I'm using them all. So what can happen is you have to do it. Okay, so let's say you've decided that I want to be X over here. And you've been moving along your course, you've been going to school, you've been going to classes. Speaking of which, one of the best ways to learn how to use practical prayer is to join our Beyond Limits class this fall, because it is an absolutely life-transforming experience in learning how the power that you already have inherently and bringing it about and under your control. Firm hand on the tiller, so to speak. Sorry about that aside, just can't help myself. So at any rate, there's a lot of work to do before you make these turns. You have to loosen some sails, you have to tighten some other sails up, you have to get ready for this boom to swing about, because if you don't, you end up wet again, And this is the kind of stuff that we need to do in our lives to correct our thinking. When we're starting to think about, oh, I'm not good enough, or we're experiencing some negative outcome of our negative thinking, we have to actually do some work to get rid of the negative thinking. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting to have a different result. As long as you're thinking in that negative line, you're going to experience the negative result because the law is working all the time. The principle doesn't change just because I'm using it in a different way. And when we turn around and we get our little work done, where you start your meditation practice, 5 minutes a day is my recommendation. Twice if you're busy. More is better. Actually, there's a really great thing we've discovered in New Thought, that talking about a practical prayer is not actually doing a practical prayer. So doing the practical prayer is one of those things you prepare yourself to change directions with, because it changes your thinking. So I'm going to suggest something we used to say in practitioner training all the time, which is stop, drop, and pray. If you are experiencing something you do not like right now, stop for a moment, withdraw yourself from it, and actually do a practical prayer. And a practical prayer is recognizing the truth back of that, the source from which all of this emerges. It's not that we have to push ourselves against the world. But when we stop to recognize the truth back of it, it changes the thinking that we're having in a direction we do want to go. See, we've been reading Emma Curtis Hopkins, and she's really big on satisfaction. And I love that word. Satisfaction. What a destination to go to. It's what I personally and what I believe we all crave is satisfaction in whatever form we think we need that. But that's what we're trying to get to, is this satisfaction as a destination. And one of the ways you do that is to change your thinking about what isn't present in your life to what is present in your life. Adjust your sails. Go with the wind. Right? Sometimes we can be sailing, and you will run into a situation in which there is no wind. It's called a calm. When we get into that point, you can start thinking, my rudder's not working. Or, look, the wind is out over there and I'm stuck here. All these kind of things can come into your mind when you're sitting there in a sailboat with no wind. I'm going to point out two things. The first is you're still moving, especially if you're on a river, because you're either going up the river with the tide or down the river with the current, even if there's no wind. True on the ocean as well. You are moving somewhere. And an even greater picture, and this is something to keep in mind, the entire planet has moved, whether you're sitting still on the water or not. So you are still in motion. So what do you do when there's no wind? Use a motor. Oh my goodness. So there we were sitting on the Hudson with no wind. It's like, oh, let's go over to the wind. The metaphor for this again is stop, drop, and pray. We have at our disposal all of the power that ever was, ever will be, and is now. It is all present right here, right now. And we can use it. But not if we don't use it. That's right, I'm drifting on that. There's a motor there. We've got gas in the tank. All you got to do is pull the cord. I'm happy drifting. How come I'm not getting to my destination? I mean, don't we do this all the time? Right? We set an intention. We're drifting along because we haven't done any of the work to set the sails in the right direction. We're ignoring the fact that we got a motor on the back of the boat. And we're wondering why we haven't gotten to the destination yet. This is like the human condition. Then we go, I've got a practical prayer. Oh my goodness. So use a motor. It's powered by the most power that ever was. And all we got to do is recognize that that power is present right here and right now and available for our use. You know? And then you got twin outboards on the back. 1,500 horsepower apiece, and you get moving really fast. See, I got all these nautical terms now. Still can't tie a knot. Until now. I can tie a granny knot. That doesn't really work that well, but. So, all of this metaphor of sailing is to say that we have the power to adjust ourselves to the principles that are the absolute truth, the source back of this experience. And when we adjust ourselves to those principles that are beyond our yes and no, that are always yes, we start moving with this flow of life, this current, and the wind that blows the current and the sailboat along moves through our lives at whatever speed we choose based on how we align ourselves with those principles. If we choose to run into the wind by misusing the principles, the only result of that is we get to experience moving backwards as the wind blows us and not getting to our destination. There's no judgment involved in this. It's cause and effect. If the cause is your thoughts, the effect is what you experience. You can choose what you're thinking. So what happens when we arrive? You've been sailing along all day, and you get back to the marina, whether by motor power or by sail power. You get back in there, and you got to break down the whole thing, put everything away, and wrap it up, and go into the slip and tie the boat up, ready for the next journey. And that's kind of what it is when we arrive at the acceptance of a practical prayer. When we actually experience practical prayer. Has anybody ever experienced this? You do a practical prayer, it becomes part of your life, and you stop doing that practical prayer because now you already believe that it's part of your life? That's the essence of answered prayers. So when we turn around and say, oh yeah, I already have that. I don't need to pray about that anymore. So we get out of the boat for a little while and we enjoy our destination, and then human nature arises and we go, well, let's go over there. And another idea comes about that moves our life in a new direction. And each one of us can choose what that idea is and what the destination is going to be and chart a new course. And you have all of the tools, all of the sails, the motor, the ropes, the little pretty stainless steel gadgets that go with a sailboat to get to your destination. So I invite you, as you go about your week, look and see where your boat is pointed. And see if that's really where you want to go. And if it is, hallelujah. And if it's not, choose a different course. You are the light. And so it is.